From being a potential saving grace for UFC 300 to finally settling the score, will the Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz trilogy fight be the biggest fight in UFC history? UFC 300 is looming on the horizon, and while it's got its highlights, there's a sense that something's missing. The card's got its share of talent with fighters like Zhang Weili, Justin Gaethje, and Charles Oliveira, but it lacks that blockbuster feel, that one marquee matchup that could elevate it from good to unforgettable. Las Vegas is quite literally the city of lights and fights, and has a reputation for hosting some of the most iconic events in UFC history. Think about it. Events like UFC 100, headlined by Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir, or UFC 200 with the epic Daniel Cormier versus John Jones matchup. These events weren't just fights, they were spectacles that lived up to the Vegas glitz and glamour. UFC 300 needs that same level of grandeur. It's not just another fight night, it's a milestone. Vegas shows are synonymous with high stakes and unforgettable moments. This is where Conor McGregor steps in. I mean, the name itself sparks a frenzy in the world of sports entertainment. His absence from the UFC has been more than just a gap in the fight cards, it's been a void in the entire sporting world. McGregor's absence, which was caused by a combination of personal issues, legal problems, and injury recovery, has only heightened the anticipation for his return. His every move, tweet, or training video sends fans and the media into a speculative frenzy about his next opponent. There have been whispers and rumors, matchups with everyone, from up-and-coming sensations to seasoned veterans. Names like Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and even a welterweight bout with Kamaru Usman have all been tossed around. And each potential fight carries its own narrative and its own charm. But out of all these possibilities, the biggest blockbuster, the fight that carries a saga-like quality, is McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Their first encounter at UFC 196 was nothing short of a classic. McGregor, riding high on a wave of victories, faced Diaz, a formidable but seemingly less favored opponent. The outcome was a stunning upset, with Diaz securing a victory by submission in the second round. This result sent shockwaves through the MMA world, positioning Diaz not just as a victor, but as a disruptor of narratives. The rematch at UFC 202 was an immediate response to the clamor for a conclusion to this unexpected turn of events. McGregor, known for his striking precision and psychological warfare, entered this fight with a point to prove. The bout was a showcase of skill, endurance, and tactical acumen, ending with McGregor narrowly securing a majority decision win. The fights were monumental financially as well. Both UFC 196 and 202 were among the highest-grossing pay-per-view events in UFC history at the time. UFC 196 reportedly drew a substantial pay-per-view buy rate of over $1.3 million. The rematch at UFC 202 was even more successful, achieving a pay-per-view buy rate reportedly exceeding $1.6 million, setting a record at the time. The much-anticipated third fight between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz never materialized for several reasons. After their second bout, McGregor's career trajectory took a meteoric rise. He became the first UFC fighter to hold two division titles simultaneously and stepped into the boxing ring with Floyd Mayweather. These achievements skyrocketed his fame even more. Nate Diaz, though less active, remained a significant figure in MMA. He's known for his no-nonsense attitude and tough fighting style, and even with fewer fights, he kept his status as a fan favorite. Timing and negotiations also played a role in the third fight never happening. The UFC's scheduling, fight agreements, and the fighters' own career plans didn't align for a third fight. McGregor's pursuits outside the UFC and Diaz's selective approach to fighting created a situation where the timing wasn't right for both parties to meet again in the octagon. But now that the timing is right and everything seems to be in place, all that's left is for the pen to be put to paper. But before that, we need Nate Diaz to come back to the UFC. He expressed his intent to leave by July 30th, making it clear that he was ready to explore other opportunities beyond the UFC. This decision followed a period where Diaz seemed to be in a tug-of-war with the UFC, seeking either a fight or his release from the organization. His interest in facing Jake Paul in a boxing match was evident, suggesting a shift in his focus towards boxing after his UFC commitments ended. Diaz's potential move to boxing wasn't out of character. Known for his exceptional ground skills, he also honed his boxing abilities under renowned coaches, indicating his capability and readiness for a boxing career. However, his UFC contract posed a constraint on his immediately venturing into boxing matches with high-profile figures like Jake Paul. The idea of Diaz returning to the UFC for a trilogy fight with Conor McGregor does seem pretty intriguing. Diaz's return would not only satisfy the long-standing curiosity of fans, but also reignite interest in his career trajectory, especially after his foray into boxing. Such a fight would draw attention not only from the hardcore MMA community, but also from a broader audience intrigued by his journey and evolution as a fighter. This context makes the prospect of his return to the UFC for a fight against McGregor even more compelling. The thing is, the McGregor-Diaz rivalry is not just a series of fights, it's a saga that has captivated the MMA world. Their first two bouts were characterized by intense competition, with each fighter claiming a victory. This unfinished business adds a layer of intensity to the potential third fight. The buildup of anticipation over the years, fueled by the fighters' individual victories and the lingering question of who would win in a final bout, has only heightened interest. Financially, this fight promises to be a colossal event. McGregor and Diaz are two of the biggest draws in the sport, and their previous fights have generated record-breaking pay-per-view numbers. A third fight, given the history and anticipation, could surpass these past achievements, providing a significant boost to the UFC, especially at a time when the organization is looking to deliver a standout event like UFC 300. Plus, this fight transcends the boundaries of typical sporting events. It's not just about the technical aspects of MMA, it's about the personalities, the stories, and the drama that these two fighters bring. It's a clash of styles, characters, and legacies. For McGregor, it's an opportunity to solidify his status as one of the greatest in the sport. For Diaz, it's a chance to prove that he's more than just a tough fighter. He's a true legend of the game. But there is one question. If the fight does happen, who will win? Well, McGregor is known for his precise striking skills, particularly his powerful left hand, which he used effectively in their rematch at UFC 202. Diaz, on the other hand, boasts impressive endurance and a strong ground game, especially his Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills, which he used to secure a submission victory in their first encounter at UFC 196. Their fights highlighted these contrasts. McGregor initially struggled with Diaz's endurance and grappling in their first bout, but adjusted his strategy in the rematch to maintain distance and utilize his striking more effectively. Diaz's resilience and pressure-fighting style, combined with his ability to absorb punishment and continue fighting effectively, have been defining aspects of their encounters. The potential third fight between them carries significant implications for their careers and reputations. For McGregor, a win would reinforce his status as a versatile and adaptive fighter, capable of overcoming past setbacks. A loss, however, could raise questions about his place among the sport's elite, especially given his recent mixed record. For Diaz, a victory would solidify his legacy as a fighter who can triumph against top-tier opponents, boosting his already strong fan appeal. A defeat might not diminish his reputation as much, given his status as a durable and fearless competitor, but it would certainly affect his standing in the sport. But there's this big question hanging in the air. Is it going to be the epic savior of UFC 300 or not? I mean, think about it. Everyone's expecting this fight to be more than just fists and kicks. It's got history, drama, and two of the biggest names in MMA. But sometimes, when you hype something up this much, even a great fight can feel a bit underwhelming. Will it be a legendary battle that we'll tell stories about? Or just another fight that had too much buzz but not enough bang? Well, it's a tough question to answer, because with McGregor and Diaz, you never really know. They've always brought something extra to their fights, something that's more than just the sport. I guess the only way we'll find out is when the fight actually happens. So, from finally settling the score to being a potential saving grace for UFC 300, this was why the Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz trilogy fight will be the biggest fight in UFC history.